There's a hidden cost to always being available. Every time you say yes without thinking, every time you respond out of guilt, every time you stay longer than you should, you are teaching the world how little it has to earn you. Carl Jung warned, "What we do not make conscious controls us." And when your availability is unconscious, automatic, compulsive, it stops being kindness. It becomes self-abandonment. You were not made to be endlessly accessible. You were made to discern, to choose, to protect the vital energy that shapes your thoughts, your dreams, your future. When you stop being constantly available, you don't just disappoint a few people. You dismantle the invisible systems that fed off your openness. You break the cycle of being needed but not valued. And everything changes, starting with you. You learned early. The more available you are, the more lovable you become. Be there, answer quickly, apologize first, smile even when you're breaking. At first, it worked. The world clapped for your selflessness, rewarded your eagerness, called you kind, strong, good. But the applause was never free. Piece by piece, you traded away something sacred, your own center. Carl Jung called this surrender of the true self, to the expectations of others, the construction of the persona, the carefully crafted mask you wear to survive within society's demands. And the longer you wear it, the easier it becomes to forget that it is a mask at all. The persona says, if I'm useful, I'll be loved. If I'm needed, I'll be safe. But love built on usefulness is not love. It is dependency, and safety purchased with self-abandonment is not safety. It is a slow form of disappearance. You start to feel it not in dramatic moments, but in the subtle erosion of your spirit. The fatigue you can't explain, the resentment blooming under your smiles, the ache that no amount of doing enough ever seems to heal. You are praised for being always there, but secretly you are never fully seen. And the world, sensing your endless availability, takes you not as a person, but as a resource. Jung warned, the greater the unconscious identification with the persona, the greater the vulnerability to collapse when it fails. When you are only who others need you to be, then every rejection feels like annihilation. Every slight feels like a death. Because if the mask is all you know of yourself, what remains when it cracks? This is the hidden cost of always being available. Not just exhaustion, but the quiet, devastating loss of your own reality. And the only way back, the only way forward, is to stop. To risk being misunderstood, to risk being inconvenient, to risk being something terrifying to the old version of yourself, whole. It doesn't happen all at once. It's not a thunderclap, not a manifesto. It's quieter than that. One day, you pause before answering the phone. One evening, you let a text go unanswered. One afternoon, you realize you don't have to explain why you said no. Tiny moments, small fractures in the old mask, but beneath these small acts, something enormous is stirring. The self, as Jung described it, the deeper center of your psyche, the part of you that was buried under the endless performance. And when the self begins to rise, the world begins to shake. At first, it will not feel powerful. It will feel wrong. You will feel guilty. You will feel selfish. You will hear the old voices inside you whisper, you're disappointing them. You're being cold. You're going to lose everyone. Because when you have spent a lifetime measuring your worth in your availability, choosing yourself feels like betrayal. It isn't. It's birth. But be warned, the moment you begin to withdraw, the moment you reclaim the energy you once gave away so freely, the world around you will not applaud. They will notice your absence like a wound. They will reach for you with questions, jokes, subtle punishments. You've changed. You're different. Are you okay? Not because they care. Because your unavailability exposes their dependency. Because your silence forces them to hear the noise they were drowning in you. Jung taught that the individuation process, the becoming of a whole, integrated self, is not a public celebration. It is a rupture, a necessary, sacred rupture. When you begin to withdraw, you do not become cold. You become clear, and that clarity burns away everything that was clinging to your old identity. Relationships based on guilt, obligations born of fear, roles that no longer fit your becoming. It will hurt. It will free you. And once you taste the power of your own unclaimed presence, you will wonder how you ever survived without it. At first, you think it's your imagination, the subtle shift in tone, the way conversations feel heavier, more brittle, the invitations that stop arriving, the messages that become colder. But it's real, because when you stop being endlessly available, you do something radical. You break the unspoken contract that others had with your old self. A contract that said, "You will always be there for me. You will absorb my chaos. You will validate my importance," without ever asking if you agreed. And when you withdraw, even without words, you send a signal they can't ignore. You are no longer willing to play a part that costs you your soul. Carl Jung spoke often about how the collective resists individuation, not because people are evil, because people are afraid. When you begin to heal, you hold up a mirror to everyone who is still asleep. When you set boundaries, you expose the ways they are boundaryless. When you become sovereign, you confront them with their own dependence. Your growth threatens their comfort. Your strength unsettles their illusions. And because facing themselves would be too painful, they choose the easier target. You're selfish now. You've changed too much. You've become so distant. Not because you are doing something wrong, because you are doing something rare. Jung understood this tension as the clash between the persona, the mask you wore for others, and the emerging self. The persona serves the group. The self serves the soul. And when you begin to favor your soul over your social image, you will lose people. You must lose people. Not because you are cruel, because you are no longer willing to betray yourself to stay loved. This is the true test. Will you retreat back into availability, into comfort, into the familiar guilt, to be accepted? Or will you endure the loneliness that comes with evolution, trusting that what remains and what grows will be truer than anything you have ever known? At first glance, being available seems harmless, generous even, a virtue dressed in patience and selflessness. But there is a toll, one that is not paid all at once, but in slow, invisible installments. Every rushed reply when your body begged for rest, every yes that tasted like resentment in your mouth, every boundary you swallowed because you feared being too much. You thought you were buying connection. What you were really buying was invisibility. Carl Jung warned us about this, how the persona, the mask we create to survive, if worn too long, begins to wear us. You became the reliable one, the good listener, the fixer, the safe harbor, and with every role you played for others, you drifted further from yourself. Until one day you realized you were exhausted not from doing too much, but from being too little of yourself. Jung called this the beginning of psychic death. Not physical death, but the slow disintegration of the self when it is starved of authenticity. The symptoms are easy to miss: chronic fatigue, irritation without clear cause, a gnawing emptiness that no success can fill, because it was never about doing more. It was about reclaiming what you gave away without realizing it, yourself. And the bitter truth is this: if you do not protect your energy, someone will always find a way to spend it for you. You were never meant to be infinitely available. You were meant to be whole, and wholeness demands discernment. It demands that you ask, with brutal, tender honesty, who actually sees me? Who simply sees what I provide? And at what point did I agree to be needed more than I was loved? These questions are not comfortable. They are disruptive. They are meant to be. Because real healing does not come from fitting back into old roles. It comes from burning those roles to the ground. There is a strange, almost alchemical shift that happens the moment you stop offering yourself by default. When you no longer rush to explain, to fix, to smooth over every discomfort, the air around you changes. You think your absence will go unnoticed. It won't. In fact, silence is often more deafening than noise, more confronting than argument, more powerful than justification. Carl Jung observed that psychic energy, the vital force of our soul, is not limitless. Where you invest it, you create presence. Where you waste it, you become invisible. When you say nothing, when you hold your center instead of collapsing into reaction, you stop scattering your energy outward. And something magnetic happens. Your very being begins to speak for you. People feel it. They feel the shift from you seeking validation to you being your own validation. They feel the vacuum where your predictability once lived. They feel the mirror you once held up for them, gone. And the discomfort they experience? It's not about you. It's about the sudden confrontation with themselves, the friend who only called when they needed something, the partner who depended on your endless understanding, the family member who counted on your silence as consent. They feel the withdrawal of your unspoken yes, and in its place, an echoing void they must now fill with their own accountability. This is the power of conserving your psychic energy. You stop being a tool others use to regulate their own emptiness. You stop being a background character in stories you did not write. Instead, you become a mirror too clear to distort, one that reflects truth without a single word spoken. And it is here, in the stillness you once feared, that your real influence begins. Most people don't see you. They see the version of you that serves their story. The helper, the peacemaker, the understanding one, the one who always forgives, the one who never demands more. Carl Jung called this phenomenon projection, the unconscious act of placing one's own unmet needs, fears, and expectations onto others. And when you were constantly available, you became a canvas for these projections. You became the reliable one, the forgiving one, the one who could be leaned on without limit. But the day you begin to withdraw, to say less, to offer less, to simply be less grabbable, those fragile images start to crack. People get angry. People feel betrayed. People accuse you of changing, as if the only acceptable version of you was the one that served their comfort. And make no mistake, this reaction is not a true judgment of your worth. It is the grief of their projections dying. You were never meant to live inside someone else's idea of who you should be. You were never meant to be responsible for the emotional balance of others. When you stop reacting, when you stop feeding the image they built of you, they are left face to face with the emptiness they once tried to fill through you. And many will not handle this kindly. They will poke, they will provoke, trying to resurrect the predictable version of you, the version they could control. But if you stay rooted, if you refuse to step back into the old script, a deeper truth reveals itself. Their reaction is proof of how much you were being used, not loved. Withdrawal becomes a revelation. It shows you not who they are pretending to be, but who they really are when your utility to them fades. It hurts, of course it hurts, but it also frees you, because now, for the first time, you are seeing clearly. Without illusions, without bargains, without silent sacrifices. And from this clarity, real choices can finally be made. When you stop being constantly available, the silence that follows can feel like exile. You feel the pull to apologize, to explain yourself, to step back into the old patterns just to avoid the awkwardness, the loneliness. But Carl Jung taught individuation, the process of becoming your true self, always begins in separation. You cannot find yourself while living permanently in the gaze of others. You cannot know your needs, your limits, your soul, while constantly bending to the pressures of external expectation. Withdrawal is not rejection. It is not coldness. It is not failure. It is the sacred clearing of psychic space. A retreat not from life, but from distortion. Without the noise of constant interaction, you begin to hear things you forgot existed inside you. Quiet longings you dismissed, dreams you buried, boundaries you crossed, parts of yourself you handed over just to keep the peace. This silence is uncomfortable. It can feel like death, and in a way, it is. It is the death of the false self. The self that only lived through reflection in other people's eyes. The self that said yes when it meant no. The self that was terrified of being misunderstood. Individuation asks you to endure this rupture, to stay inside the discomfort long enough to hear your own soul's voice rise again. Because on the other side of withdrawal is not loneliness. It is sovereignty. A new center forms inside you, stronger, quieter, unshakable. Not because the world has become kinder, but because you have become real. And from this realness, new relationships are born. Relationships that are not based on dependency, convenience, or projection, but on truth. Withdrawal is not the end of connection. It is the first step toward connection that does not cost you yourself. When you refuse to step back, when you cling to being always open, always reachable, always responsive, there is a cost. It doesn't happen all at once. It's slow, almost invisible at first. You find yourself drained after conversations. You resent people you claim to love. You wake up tired even after a full night's sleep. Psychologically, Jung would say, you are bleeding psychic energy, the vital force your unconscious needs to grow, to create, to heal. Instead, you leak it. Every yes you don't mean, every argument you didn't need to join, every anxious reply to a text you could have left unread. Each one is a tiny betrayal of yourself. And these betrayals stack up, first as exhaustion, then as bitterness, then as depression, resentment, or chronic anxiety. You cannot trace back to a single event. You lose the ability to trust yourself. You second-guess your needs. You forget what your real emotions even feel like, because your emotional system has been hijacked, overridden by the constant demands of others, and your constant fear of letting them down. Jung warned, what we repress does not disappear. It festers. If you silence your inner boundaries long enough, they will find other ways to scream. Sudden outbursts you can't control. Apathy so deep you can't care about anything. Rage at yourself for being weak, when in truth it was never weakness. It was abandonment. Your own abandonment. And the world, it will not stop asking for more. No one will come to set your boundaries for you. The world rewards the over-available until it discards them without a second thought. The more you give yourself away, the more invisible you become. You are not protecting connection by staying always available. You are protecting others' comfort at the cost of your own soul. The first time you pull away, the world will resist. People who were used to instant access will question you. They will guilt you. They will call you selfish, distant, arrogant. Expect it. Because when you change the rules of your availability, you force others to confront the truth. They were never entitled to you. An entitlement, once exposed, tends to scream. But something else happens too. Something quieter. Something almost imperceptible at first. You start to respect yourself again. Not in the inflated way the ego likes, not with bravado or self-congratulation, but in the deep, bone-level sense that you are no longer living at the mercy of others' demands. Each time you say no without justifying, each time you pause instead of reacting, each time you choose your peace over someone else's comfort, you build a new foundation inside yourself, one made not of fear, but of sovereignty. Jung taught that the self, the true integrated center of your psyche, cannot emerge while you are still enslaved to the persona. The persona is the mask, the smiling, agreeable, always available version of you that was crafted for social survival. But behind the mask, something real has been waiting. Not perfect, not polished, real. And that realness requires protection. Withdrawal, then, is not selfishness. It is sacred. It is the fence around the garden of your becoming. It is the quiet declaration, my energy is not free. My presence is not guaranteed. My soul is not up for negotiation. Each moment you honor that fence, you strengthen the roots of the self. You begin to move differently, speak differently, relate differently, not because you are trying to seem strong, but because you are no longer willing to pretend you are weak. Real self-respect does not come from demanding others treat you better. It comes from treating yourself like someone worth protecting, even when no one else understands. Especially then, you were taught that to be loved, you had to be available. That presence equals devotion. That saying yes, even when you wanted to say no, was the price of belonging. But Jung would tell you, belonging that demands self-abandonment is not love. It is survival, and survival is not living. When you withdraw, truly withdraw, you do something terrifying and holy at once. You stop begging for connection and start requiring resonance. At first, it will feel like loss. The easy conversations, the familiar rhythms, the false intimacy built on your willingness to sacrifice yourself. Gone. But in the stillness after withdrawal, something miraculous happens. The people who were only tethered to your utility fade away, and the ones who are capable of seeing you, the ones who are capable of meeting you, not your masks, not your availability, but you, find their way closer, not because you demanded it, but because your silence created a vacuum that only the true could step into. Withdrawal clears the stage. It burns down the false scaffolding. It makes space for authentic relationship, the kind that does not require you to dilute yourself to be loved. In Jung's vision, individuation is not isolation for its own sake. It is the necessary precondition for genuine encounter. Only when you are whole in yourself, only when your value is not on the auction block, can you meet another not as a beggar, but as a sovereign being. Withdrawal, then, is not the end of connection. It is its beginning. A connection that is no longer fueled by your exhaustion, but by your presence. No longer built on obligation, but on mutual recognition. No longer fragile, but enduring. Because when you are no longer afraid to be alone, you are no longer afraid to be seen. And when you are no longer willing to sell yourself for crumbs, you finally make room for the feast. When you stop being available to everyone's expectations, something deeper than solitude begins to take root. It's not just silence. its sovereignty. At first, it feels awkward, like learning how to walk again with muscles you forgot you had. You will want to explain yourself. You will want to apologize for the space you are reclaiming. You will be tempted to soften the silence, to reassure the world that you are still safe, still the same. But you are not the same. You are becoming what Jung described in the process of individuation, a center unto yourself. You start to realize that not every glance deserves your attention. Not every story deserves your listening. Not every emotion thrown at you deserves an answer. You no longer react out of fear of abandonment. You respond, if you choose to respond at all, out of alignment with your inner truth. This is emotional sovereignty. Not a wall, not an armor, but a grounded axis within you that cannot be spun by outside winds. The ones who once relied on your compliance will call you cold. The ones who thrived on your quick forgiveness will say you've changed. The ones who only knew how to meet you in your wounded availability will accuse you of arrogance, distance, selfishness, but it won't matter. Because the part of you that once needed to be understood at any cost, that once feared being too much or too distant, has already died. And in its place, a quieter, deeper self has risen. One that knows that silence is not absence. It is presence concentrated. One that knows that no relationship built on your self-erasure was ever truly love. One that carries their own center wherever they go and offers connection not from hunger, but from fullness. You are no longer available. You are no longer waiting to be chosen. You have chosen yourself. And everything changes. When you stop being available, you don't just lose people. You don't just change your inner world. You shift the gravitational field around you. It happens quietly, without fanfare. At first, it feels like absence. Calls that don't come, invitations that dry up, people who move away as if sensing a door has closed. You might mistake this for loss. You might even mourn it for a while, but stay still. Don't fill the silence, because underneath the surface, something more profound is happening. The architecture of your life is being rebuilt, brick by brick, choice by choice, vibration by vibration. The ones who stayed only for what you could give. Your attention, your validation, your emotional labor will drift away. The situations that thrived on your exhaustion will crumble. In their place, slowly, new alignments begin to appear. Not pulled by force, not manufactured by effort, drawn naturally like rivers carving stone. You will find yourself meeting people who respect space as much as intimacy, who understand that silence is not rejection, but reverence. You will find yourself called into environments that honor discernment, where your no is as respected as your yes. This is the magnetism of authenticity, a resonance that cannot be faked, because it comes from the depth of your inner structure. Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And when you become, the world around you reshapes itself accordingly. Not because you demanded it, not because you proved your worth, but because your very existence now operates at a frequency where only truth can stay. And so, what you once feared losing was never yours to begin with. What you now attract is what your soul was waiting for all along. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen without grief. But it happens. And when it does, you will finally understand the price of your old availability and the incalculable value of the space you now fiercely protect. This is how your life begins again. Not louder, but deeper. Not through conquering, but through unwavering presence. Not by chasing after what abandoned you, but by standing so rooted in who you are, that only what can meet you there survives the distance. And this is freedom. So here you are, not broken, but rebuilt, not emptied, but cleared. The silence you once feared has become your home now. The unavailability you once apologized for has become your boundary, your clarity, your crown. You are no longer chasing understanding from those committed to misunderstanding you. You are no longer shrinking yourself to fit inside lives too small for your expansion. Carl Jung taught that real transformation happens not by adding more to yourself, but by stripping away everything that was never truly you. And you have begun that work, not with noise, not with endless explanations, but with the most powerful declaration you could ever make. Your absence where you are not honored, your presence only where it is earned. And so a choice stands before you now. You can slip back into the old gravity, soften your edges, reopen old doors, make yourself small again. Or you can keep walking forward into a life that demands more of you. More solitude, more strength, more sovereignty, but also more real connection, more real peace, and the kind of love for yourself and others that only truth can sustain. The world will adjust, or it will move out of your way. Either way, you are no longer available for anything less than the life you were meant to live. And that, finally, is enough. Keep going. You are not alone. You are simply ahead. And that's exactly where you were always meant to be.